Welcome to Professor Reboot. Today, we're breaking down exactly how to write an effective ethical paper for your Introduction to Ethics course. By the end of this video, you'll know how to use primary ethical sources, apply ethical concepts to real-world situations, craft a strong argumentative thesis and thesis map, and present an objective, well-supported position and conclusion. The first step is to understand the nature of your assignment. Most ethics papers require you to analyze a contemporary moral issue using one or more ethical theories. This isn't your opinion. It's an argument grounded in philosophy and one that should be stated objectively. Your professor expects you to cite primary sources like Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, Kant's Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals, or John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism, not just summaries from blogs or textbooks, or ideas presented by journalists or analysts such as myself about what these philosophers may think or believe. You will need to cite these primary ethical sources to support every claim you make in your paper. You will need to explain each of your ethical theories. Start by clearly explaining the ethical theory you're using in your own words. For example, if you're writing about virtue ethics, you can focus on the character and flourishing, which is Aristotle's view of how virtue ethics works. Now, a more contemporary version of virtue ethics, Rosalind Hursthouse, presents focusing on flourishing as being a characteristic that transcends the binary or the norms of society that Aristotle once perceived. So you can compare and contrast, for instance, these 3,000-year-old separate concepts about the very same topic, virtue ethics. If you're discussing deontology, consider how Kant emphasizes duties and universal moral laws. In Kant's philosophy, the moral imperative to deliver upon your duty to society overcomes and overrides all other responsibilities we may have. For example, Immanuel Kant considers it a moral imperative to always tell the truth, even if the truth might somehow cause harm to the person you are telling it to. For instance, if you've ever gotten a sweater that you did not like from a family member as a gift, you are usually instructed to say thank you because it's the thought of the gift that matters most in a situation like that. But Immanuel Kant would say that you are morally obligated by deontology. It is your duty to inform this person that in fact you do not like the sweater that they have given you. And that by doing so, that by being categorically honest and objectively honest in all that you do, you bring to the forefront the greater happiness and the greater good for all. Utilitarianism aims for the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Perhaps initiated by Jeremy Bentham and expanded by the very progressive John Stuart Mill, the concept of ensuring that the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people is not as simple as it may seem. How, for instance, are you to determine the value of that happiness for each individual? And I, for example, may consider it a greater joy to read a book than to eat a piece of candy. That may be inverted for the person next to me. So if I am looking at establishing the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, I might look to statistics and studies, but also to the greater population and what I hear them expressing as their needs. And it's very important to look very broadly and not just at what we believe to be that happiness standard. Because especially today in 2025, tools like artificial intelligence and search engines optimize what we see to present us with a kind of echo chamber that emphasizes the things we look for. In other words, if you go looking for what you think makes the world happy, you will find that what makes the world happy is exactly what makes you happy, because that is how the internet is now engineered to provide you with information. For that reason, perhaps alone, when you write an ethics paper, it is critical that you first look to those primary sources, because most of them predate the onset of the internet. Another common example we use when citing primary ethical sources when presented with creating an ethical framework in our paper is known as the trolley problem, created by ethical philosopher Philippa Foot around 1967. The concept of the trolley problem describes you as the engineer of a trolley. You are faced with two tracks. If you remain on the track ahead of you, you are destined to hit at least one living person who is stuck or tied to the tracks. You could pull the lever, and in so doing, you would switch the track, avoiding the one person, and instead hitting 5 people. Now, this moral dilemma may seem deceptively simple on the surface, but it asks you to determine something that is undefinable in the terms of ethics, and that is, what is the fundamental value of human life? Can human life value be quantified? Is saving one person more important than saving 5? Is saving 5 people more important than saving 1? What is it about those choices that drive your decision? Now, there is a hack to the trolley problem. Many people argue that the true answer is to actually derail the trolley or jump in front of it yourself. That act of self-sacrifice, therefore saving both the individual and the group of 5 people from abject horror. By self-sacrificing, you espouse the highest ethic. You demonstrate something for the greater good. However, you also take away your own ethical freedom, and that defies the ethical rules of hedonism. Hedonism, which of course ascribes to the idea that you as an individual should always pursue whatever it is that makes you yourself the most happy. And of course, there's also Stoicism, popularized by Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, who believed that the best thing that we can do for the world is to keep our sorrows and our woes to ourselves, and that by doing so, we would prevent the spread of those sorrows to other people. So Stoicism refers to a method of ethics where we hold tight and close our emotional structures so that others may go on with their lives unhindered or unencumbered by our beliefs. Now, when you are writing any ethical paper, it is critical that you use direct citations from these primary sources to demonstrate your understanding. For instance, quote Aristotle on virtue as a mean between extremes, or Kant's categorical imperative. Explain these concepts briefly before applying them. Then contextualize how you are explaining these concepts by pulling in a quotation or a paraphrase from the work directly, and then finally explain how that work relates back to your primary ethical thesis or argumentative statement or declaration of purpose. Next, apply the theory to a modern ethical question, such as privacy in artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, or universal health care. The key is to bridge theory and practice. How would Kant's duty-based ethics approach artificial intelligence surveillance? What would John Stuart Mill say about wealth distribution? Use examples, but avoid emotional appeals. Stick to logical reasoning supported by theory. Do your best to find quotations and paraphrases within the primary sources to support whatever contemporary stances you are taking. And do not include your personal opinion. An ethical paper is meant to be presented objectively, and I statements have no business in an ethical paper unless, of course, the prompt is about your personal ethical belief. In such instances, it is all right or acceptable to include I statements, but you should keep them brief and focus them by wrapping them around those primary ethical sources. In every instance of an ethical paper, your goal is to write an objective claim so that whoever reads your paper tries to embrace the same position you are presenting to them. Now, your thesis is the backbone of your paper. It should state your ethical position and reference the theory you're using. Next, when we write a thesis statement, or really any paper, we never self-reference in the paper itself. That means you will not use phrases like, using Kantian deontology, this paper will. Instead, you simply jump straight to the declaration you are making about the position you are taking. For example, you might say, using Kantian deontology, it is clear that artificial intelligence facial recognition violates moral duty because it treats individuals as means rather than ends. Now, there presents the declarative purpose of your ethical argument. It is stated plainly and the position is clear. Next, you would add your thesis map. The thesis map explains your argument structure and is attached to your thesis statement declaration. In an ethical paper, again, arguing Kantian deontology in the context of artificial intelligence facial recognition, you may include a statement like, because Kant's categorical imperative reminds us of our duty to deliver equity to all people. Secondly, artificial intelligence surveillance presents myriad biases and problematic discriminatory experiences for the people that it unfairly targets. And there are many common objections that can be referenced using other ethical sources, such as Mary Wollstonecraft, Philippa Foot, Rosalind Hursthouse, or John Stuart Mill. Now, with a thesis statement and map like that, you can see that Kant, while the primary focus of this ethical paper, will be backed up and validated by multiple other primary ethical sources, therefore making a stronger paper overall. Next, remember that you must be objective. Objectivity matters most specifically in ethical papers because ethics papers are not rants. They are reasoned analyses. They are not religious in nature, though you may refer to religion from an ethical standpoint. If you rely on religious texts, you enter into a murky territory where your objectivity may be called into question. So tread lightly when using religious texts as a source of ethical reasoning. Instead, apply those primary ethical philosophies in conjunction to any religious texts you might wish to bring into the situation, and use those primary ethical texts to support whatever religious text might be delivering a similar message, because religion is highly subjective. Next, use evidence again from primary texts and not from personal feelings. Be sure to address counter-arguments. If you argue against artificial intelligence surveillance, acknowledge a utilitarian perspective and explain why Kantian ethics provides a stronger answer. Show how and why other arguments may exist and why the position you are taking is the stronger option. For example, according to Kantian ethics, and your conclusion then summarizes the reasoning you introduce. It should not introduce new ideas, but rather reiterate what you have already stated throughout your ethics paper. So a thesis declares your purpose, thesis map declares the direction you will take to prove your purpose, and the conclusion restates what your purpose was by demonstrating very briefly how your statement and position on ethics is the strongest possible position that can be taken on this particular subject. To recap, an excellent ethics paper should clearly explain the theory using primary sources. It should apply it to a real-world issue, present a strong, organized thesis, stay objective and balanced, end with a conclusion that reinforces your argument. Follow these steps, and you'll not only meet expectations, you will stand out. Thanks for watching.